Hey everyone, this is Tony Holbein. You are listening to The Revenue Formula with Mikkel and Tony. In today's episode, we share 3 practical tips to onboard yourself in a new organization and deliver outstanding results from the get-go. Enjoy.
What happens if I click this one? Oh, should not have done that. Should not have clicked that button.
That was such a dad move.
I remember there was a time when we had like sound effects on here. They're all gone.
Oh, they're still there?
No, this
click it.
This is clips from past episodes.
Oh yeah, okay, that's boring. I don't want to listen to myself.
Cack payback. I think if we asked AI, maybe Kuhn can do it for us. If we asked AI to summarize, all the episodes down to one keyword, what would it be? It would probably be cack payback.
No, you know what it would be? Kids.
That's also a contender for sure. Or segue.
There you go.
Because we're going to segue into the episode. We're going to take a little bit of a different subject today, aren't we? We're going to be trailblazing the path here for a different episode in the show. So we've done a lot on CAC Payback, funny enough, like going very nitty gritty in analyzing the business, how to run certain motions. What we've not really discussed about is the individuals, like even stuff for the individual listener on how they can build their career, how they can grow. And don't worry, it's not going to be, I think, a common thing. We always talk about the soft side, but there is at least one thing we want to discuss today, which is around the whole, if you enter a new job as a leader, what should you do?
Yes. And this is really, yes, it could be a VP of sales thing or a CRO or VP marketing or revenue operations leader, but somewhere along those lines, even for the odd case finance person that's listening to us, I think some of the advice is actually going to be pretty valuable.
In which case, I just got to say respect.
Yeah. Slow clap.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the funny thing is, what I've seen and what is super common out there is, well, you do a 30, 60, 90-day plan.
You do the 30, 60, 90 plan.
And in 30 days, you're going to be here. You know about the business and what they do and the people. And then day 60, you know kind of how this machine works. And day 90, you can start contributing.
Yes.
And it's like 3 months to start contributing. We're going to talk a bit about some of the tricks, some of the things, at least habits we have picked up, some of the things we've seen others, new additions to the team do really well.
Yeah.
So hopefully if you're switching jobs, starting anytime soon, or will in the near future. I mean, average tenure is 2.5 years. So chances are, yeah, you at some point will. Hopefully this is going to be helpful and you can bookmark and get
I think another way to listen to this episode as well is to just think about, well, maybe I should try and apply some fresh eyes on the go-to-market organization that I'm running right now.
Yeah.
And I think we'll have some ideas how you could maybe do that.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really, both with actual fresh eyes because you're entering a new organization, or you kind of have the need for and kind of maybe executing some of the same playbook.
Yeah. I think the first part that really truly makes a difference, whether actually you're hiring someone or you're starting a job, is how much do they know before they even begin?
Yep.
And I'm not talking about competence in terms of skill in the job they're going to do. I heard Jason Lemkin talk about so few people do this when they apply for a job. Research the company. Just request a demo, try out the software, watch a bunch of videos, read the website, read press, really get a feel for what is it this company is doing, why is it successful or maybe not successful, to get a feel for who they are, what they're doing. Right?
Yeah. And I think, so realistically speaking, and I'm talking to some folks that are quote unquote on the bench and looking for an opportunity. So you can't do this for every opportunity out there. It just doesn't work out. But if you get further into the process and if you actually think this is worth it, I think you should absolutely invest that time. I think one of the tricks that we can just really kind of tell folks to think about is that your understanding of the company actually evolves with every single touch point that you have with the company.
Yeah.
Right? And before you sign the deal to really start there, you should actually already have a fairly good understanding what's wrong here.
Yeah.
Right? And I think if you're an account executive, let's just say from that level, you want to be interested in, like, is this product good? What are people saying about it? How good is the competition? You want to know some of these things. But if you're starting a little bit higher up, like a CRO, VP of revenue operations, etc., you actually want to do some triaging of the organization before you even take the offer. And that triaging is important for two reasons. One, is my skill set a match?
Yeah.
You want to kind of figure this out. Two, how much trouble is this thing? Right? And then three is really, well, okay, I kind of get an idea what needs to be done in order to maybe write this 30, 60, 90 plan.
Yeah.
And those are the things that I think all of us are subconsciously kind of doing anyway. I don't think anyone in this current environment is like, oh, sure, let's just join a new company. I think everyone is doing this bit of triaging, which I think we're gonna, probably should talk about today. But I think that's really where the first big milestone needs to be achieved.
Yeah. And I think also like you don't want to spend the first 30 days understanding what the company is doing. You need to understand that. And you're right. You don't do that when you have the first 20-minute screening call. But at some point, if you're discussing joining as a marketing leader, what I would want to see is, hey, what is the plan? And how have you been doing against the plan? You want to see that stuff. You don't want to start, then go like finance shares, innocently so a spreadsheet, 2025 plan, and it's just out of whack. There's no way it's going to happen, right? You want to be able to see some of these things up front in terms of how the business operates, because then you truly get a feel for what you're about to embark on.
Yeah. And some people out there might be like, well, but some of that information, they're probably not going to share this with me up front, right?
Well, you can offer to do an NDA, of course, but...
So, I mean, I'm just saying there will be a limit, and depending on where in the organization you start, they will do more work. For example, for me, they sent me, when I was applying as a CRO, they actually sent me a churn analysis, like stuff like that, right? Because I very quickly identified that's probably the issue of the business and figuring this stuff out. But the way you should actually be thinking about this is think about you visiting the doctor's office, right? And you stepped wrong and your ankle hurts and you clearly can't walk.
Yeah.
You limp into the doctor's office, and the doctor looks at this thing and it's like, oh, you have a twisted ankle or a broken ankle or something's wrong with your foot, right?
Yeah.
Kind of immediately
Someone
he's like,
kicked you really hard.
He looks at the whole of you. It's like, there's the issue.
Yeah.
I got it. And that can go really fast, right? So if you tell me 3 or 4 facts of your company, for example, your ACV, your motions, your some of that stuff, your GRR, I can very quickly triage and be like, okay, this is shit all over the place. Or it's like the problem's over there, right? But just like the doctor's office, yes, they will very quickly get to the conclusion your ankle is twisted. But what exactly to do about it, that will take maybe a little bit longer time. Yeah. Maybe they need to do an x-ray. Maybe they need to do, I don't know, some other scan. Maybe they need to do some other work. I don't know what goes into that particular problem of a twisted ankle. I'm not a doctor. But that might take some more time. Just as for you, if this is a go-to-market organization, you can see where the issue is, but it will take you more time to really dig in and understand why the issue is and what you want to do about it, right? But the initial triaging of like understanding where the motion is broken, you can do this in the interview phase, right? So this is, we totally encourage you. And things to think about is ask for their ACV, and that gives you an understanding of which of the motions fit or don't fit.
Yeah.
If someone tells you they have an average contract value of $5,000 and they're doing a lot of outbound, it's like, okay, there's probably something that maybe doesn't work out. If there are any, ACV is really interesting, number one, then the next question could be GRR. If their ACV is $5,000 and their gross retention rate is like 99%, slam dunk case, fucking great, let's go. I would even go like, oh, that must be wrong. That must be too good.
Are you bullshitting me right now? Yeah.
Right? But if
that's the investor number.
Yeah. But the other way around could also be like, well, you have a $50,000 ACV and your gross retention rate is 85.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, that sounds off to me also, right? And then the last thing I would probably kind of ask is a combination between CAC payback overall and growth rate.
Yeah.
So I would kind of probably ask in one or the other of those two things if they aren't clear yet.
Yeah.
Because that gives you, if it's a 10+ million organization, gives you a bit of a feel for how sustainable is this thing that they built. Like, does their go-to-market fit? Have they reached that?
Yeah.
And like, are you going to be fired in 12 months because you don't hit the growth goals anyway?
And I think that's an important distinction also. Like, it can help you, some of these insights you're asking for can help you determine, is this a place I want to work? But more importantly, also it can prepare you for the task at hand, right? Because if you walk in there day one and say, churn is the issue, then you can start digging way faster versus you spent the first week with a meet and greet and a demo and a whatever. And time just passes super fast.
I think the more impactful thing to think about here is, once you figure out the issues with the business, and I can tell you, there's an issue in every business.
Yeah.
It actually, depending on the role, obviously, gives you a way better negotiation position.
Yeah.
Like way better. For me, it was like clear that, okay, this, actually they had fantastic churn. That wasn't actually
Fantastic high or
no, it was like really,
no.
for an SMB business, they had like great churn numbers, but they just didn't know where the growth is going to come from.
Yeah.
So all of this was a growth case. Like,
Yeah.
okay, we're kind of growing 40%, but we need to get it up to 120. And that then became very quickly okay, so this is where the shoe hurts.
Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty expensive.
Yeah.
But this is then how you can actually have that conversation,
Yeah.
right? Versus you join a rocket ship where you cannot see anything that's wrong with the business, which by the
Yeah.
way isn't true.
Yeah.
But then like, oh, can I please be part of this?
Yeah.
That's a different conversation,
Yeah,
right? So really doing this triaging for your job security and is it a fit for me?
Yeah.
But also for optimizing your negotiation honestly before you enter.
So I think that's at least one. There is a start before you start.
Yes.
And I mean, I think if you're beginning the first month trying to understand the competitive landscape and all that stuff, you've wasted a lot of time.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say, but then you have. And the whole point is the quicker you can ramp yourself to actually deliver, the perception is going to be fundamentally different.
Yes.
And I think that's the other kind of habit I've had, which is, and it sounds like I'm starting new jobs all the time, by the way. It's not the case, but it's getting points on the board quickly. And I'm not just talking about making a random decision and delivering something, but being able to use that insight you got before you started to have a pretty clear direction of what is it we could do right now, right? And if again, maybe we're hopping too much on the churn thing, but if that's the case, you're obviously going to meet with a bunch of people. And you can now start talking with them about that issue and actually try and identify, is there some low-hanging fruit, something where everyone goes like, oh gosh, so what I told you was like, we don't have a help center. Oh, can we just get a help center, please?
Yeah.
And it's not that hard to do. It's kind of a quick thing to get something up and running. And I think that's where, if you can do that within, I would say the first month or two, then you're actually off to the races.
So, and we kind of debated this actually before we hit record here. And I think there's a bit of a balancing act that's really difficult because, yes, your boss, and depending on which position you're joining this organization, a lot of other people might expect you to, put some points on the board, to show change, to live up to the hype that maybe has happened.
Yeah.
Because in some turnaround cases, the story sometimes becomes a little bit like, oh yeah, it's not going so great. But she is joining.
Yeah, she's gonna change everything.
She's
now.
the Messiah.
Yeah.
Coming in, fixing the whole thing.
The Michael Jordan joining the baseball team.
And living up to that hype.
Yeah.
It's pretty difficult. You want to give the management team and maybe the people around also looking at this, you want to give them some easy ways to be like, see, we were right. Come on, this thing is working out. So on that side, you want to actually put some points on the board really quickly. But on the flip side, and this is what you need to balance out, and this is also in reference to Jacko from Winning by Design, you can't just walk into a spaceship that you've never, you've seen a similar one, but not the exact same one. A similar one, completely different dashboard, different things, different buttons, and you sit down in this elaborate, I don't know, spaceship chair or something. The first thing is like, oh, you know what, this area over here that I can barely touch with my right hand, I think we need to change it all.
Yeah.
Like all of this needs to go away.
Or you just push one button. It's like, dude, that was the self-destruct.
Yeah, exactly. I brought a screenshot of my previous thing. I want to have that over here.
Yeah.
So you kind of need to balance those two things out to not make stupid mistakes.
Yeah.
So, and here comes the story. When I joined that conversation back then, I left a fairly well-functioning team.
Yeah.
And when I hired a VP of sales or VP of CS back then in that organization, one of the things I told them is like, hey, I don't want you to come in and change all kinds of stuff. Like, I want you to come in, lead this team, improve everything. But really, for the first 90 days, I actually don't even want to discuss with you what your ideas are for change. I'm actually not interested. I want you, though, because I really value this stuff, please write it down And then in 90 days, once you understand everything a little bit better, let's actually go through those points that you've written down with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
And let's have an informed conversation about this, right? Because I don't want to explain 20,000 times all the time, like, oh, why don't we do self-serve?
Yeah.
Like, because all of our competitors are doing, we should be doing self-serve, Tony. Why aren't we doing self-serve? And basically, I didn't want to have that conversation, right?
Yeah.
So let's wait a little bit and kind of do it like this. Now, I had this mind when I was entering this other organization, which was at 15 million, like fairly established. I was telling people like, hey, I actually don't want to touch anything in the first 90 days. I need to observe, I need to learn. I want to make, things right. What happened? Mr. Tony on day 2.
Okay, let's change.
Started changing stuff.
Yeah.
And I was just laughing at myself back then because I realized how, I don't know what I don't know how you call it, what an idiot I am, basically.
Yeah, correct.
Still true. That's what you're trying to say. But I think here comes the difference. If you are doing changes on the architectural level, let's just say it like that.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
No.
Like you don't understand the product market, how intricate the product market fit was. You don't understand how intricate the go-to-market fit was from. It's like you're silly if you're touching any of these bigger pieces. But what you can do, there are some things that are clearly just wrong.
Yeah.
Like you look at it once, and there's no high level impact that you might not be seeing because it's really straightforwardly clear.
Yeah.
You need to change that.
Yeah.
So one of the things, and this is just, to defend myself and,
Yeah. Go ahead.
I feel like I have to now.
Yeah.
Wonderful marketing lady, did a fantastic job. And she was optimizing her budget. And she was like, hey, our UK lead's pretty expensive. Let's take budget away and put it over there. Pretty straightforward. What I then had to tell her was like, but we have 10 reps sitting in the UK.
Yeah.
80% of what they're doing is inbound.
Yeah.
You're totally right. This is how you would balance your overall budget. But the amount of cost that you're now creating by having reps just sit around doing nothing pales in comparison to the lead tweak cost that you just did there. And that was all fine, by the way. Kind of super easily reversible and so forth, right? Kind of put some, points on the board, I guess. But I think those kind of changes really quickly to be done.
Yeah.
The other stuff, hold on.
I think it's also like you don't want to. So here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to start the first month and come in with this grand plan to change massive things where you need to take people on a journey and they don't know you, right? What you rather want to do is look at what is everyone telling me that I also notice that's just broken. So the risk is fairly low. Even though it might not have the greatest impact on revenue, everyone is just going to be really happy that thing was finally fixed, right? One example I had was navigation on a website, completely broken. All the sales reps were constantly asking, hey, where's the block? I can't find it, which is like, well, you should be in the navigation, I was not there. This was a fix that took like a week to make. Like, let's design a new one. Let's implement it. Done. That's easy points on the board. Another could be reallocating budget. You will know with fairly high certainty whether it's going to work out. And the other thing is it's easy to reverse if it doesn't work, which is another factor, right?
Yeah.
So I like to consider the risk as part of it. And then the other is what is the like who will really benefit from this change? If you really need the team to buy into you, there are some teams that might be resistant to the new person coming in because of what's happened there. Well, then it can be a little hack to do something where the team is kind of like, yeah, we really want to have this whatever change happen, right?
So let's talk about the team for a little bit.
Yeah.
Because those are two things that should happen fairly quickly, but also sometimes can't happen very quickly. So especially if you're coming in as a sales leader, as a CRO, as a senior marketing leader, you will have a target on your back.
Yeah.
Like that's how this thing works. You might have stolen promotion from someone.
Yeah.
You might have been put on top of someone that previously reported to the CEO. You might have, screwed some people over. By not your fault at all, but just by you being there, kind of that happened, right? So in many cases, there will be a little bit of a political game happening around you, right? Which you obviously need to be aware of. So number one, I think you have to sit down with the team very quickly. Obviously, sometimes this happens even during the hiring process. Get to understand them, get to know them, see who can scale, who has maybe some issues, who kind of maybe thinks wrongly about things, who's great and so forth. Very quickly in your head, what's going to form is a little bit of like a map, like who can scale for how long, right? And who maybe needs to be replaced or who has issues in the team, right? The other dimension you have to look at this, and I'm not happy to talk about it like this, but you have to look at this also a little bit politically, actually. You really want to make sure that you have some people on the team that are, Team Mikkel.
Yeah.
Right? That kind of support you. And the thing is, some folks overdo that part.
Yeah.
Some folks don't do it all, but some folks overdo it. And you usually see it, new CRO comes in, and then 2 or 3 months later, new VP of sales, new head of revenue operations, new something else. That's when you see someone is maybe overdoing it just a little bit, right? Because all the hires that will be made by the CRO, they will be clearly loyal to the CRO in most cases, right? And that's how I then stack the team and kind of have your kind of own group versus maybe the leftovers. And doing this too much, I think you might be silly to do it like this. Yeah. But not having this dimension at all on your radar, I think you will also make a mistake.
Yeah. I think also you have to realize sometimes what happens when a new leader comes in, the rest of the team might fear that, hey, has my career progression now reset back to zero? Like, am I starting over now? Because this person doesn't know me. They don't know what I've done here. Yeah. And I think that's why you're right. Like, initially, there is some time you do need to spend with the team to understand how much can they scale and how much, frankly, do they want to? What is it they want to do, right? And I think that's pretty critical as well, which I think it's much better spent that time, the first 30 days, securing a great working relation rather than having to understand the business, right? I think that's much more important. And there's the classic saying, you want to go far, go together. And so that's very much needed, that kind of mindset. And our listeners are smart, so this is not lost on them. They know this already, I hope. So yeah, that's at least one point.
So the team is important, and we can talk more and more about that, by the way. And yes, I think when you have a new boss, you always need to reprove yourself. That's totally the case. But I think another thing, especially as a CRO or go-to-market leader, you unfortunately have to look a little bit at the data. I know. And consider this is kind of now the thing, okay, your ankle hurts. And what's the x-ray now? Oh, it's going to take another day or two. Yeah. It's like, this is the painful stuff, right? The reason why you want to know this is you want to go 1 or 2 levels deeper in your diagnosis. Yeah. Like, you want to understand where's the problem why are you limping in the first place? Yeah. Like, did you go climbing or you were drunk? What's going on here, right? Yeah. In order to get to this level, we just have experienced this now a couple of times. You need to figure out, how does your customer journey look like? How does your funnel look like? You need to figure those things out. And that will probably take you a little bit of time. And I think for that specific piece, what I would actually recommend is not to try and do the full thing in one go. Figure out where is it the worst? Yeah. Or where do you really need the insights? Where do you have the most questions? Maybe rather go about it like this. And then invest time in fixing those parts of the funnel in terms of insights. Yeah. You're not changing anything, right? Just to be extremely clear, all of the stuff that, RevOps mindset might be like, oh, you should look at tools or we look at process. Yeah. Those things come later. Yeah. You first want to understand where in your heat map, where's the bow tie red? Yeah. And once you have identified where it is, and for that you need to have a little bit of data, then you can start fixing the process and the tools and the people and all of that stuff around it. There's a bit of a chicken and egg, without the process, you won't have a data and so forth. But you as a new CRO just need to cut through this somehow. Yeah. You need to just cut this knot and kind of, no, actually, this is how it should be. This is what I see. Here's a problem.
Would you DIY the analysis or delegate it?
I personally, myself, I will probably work on it directly with, like a RevOps person or something like this, right? Yeah. I think, putting some of the data pieces in place, I think that's fairly straightforward in some cases. You might just be using a lot of political capital really quickly. Yeah, right?
I'm also thinking how it's going to be received, right? The reason I asked this is also because I think some listeners might be wondering about this question. What could happen if you delegate it is, is my area being reviewed now? I'm being asked to do a report on blank. Here's what I've done and would do again in the future. To your point is I would lead it myself to kind of show I take this thing seriously and I can do the job. I'm not going to pawn it off because this is important. But it would invite folks to be part of that journey. I don't want to end up in a situation like we talked about with QBRs, where people feel like, okay, now I'm getting backstabbed with stuff I've never heard was going to go down. So what the fuck?
Yes. So I think you need to overcome this. And this is maybe not something you necessarily do in the first 30, 60 days, but there are also some folks out there that can help you with that, right? There are some consultants out there that can you kind of pull in to kind of help you figure out the funnel. You know, I'm not going to go deeper into this, but there are some ways where you can get a third party.
Yeah.
You would basically kind of sit down with your VP marketing and you would say like, hey, what about this? What about this? What about that? And he or she can't answer. And then you can say like, well, is it maybe because we don't have the data in order? And then he or she would say, yeah, that's what it is. And then instead of you guys kicking off a big process to try and fix it, you could, in that meeting, it's like, hey, should we look at like a consultant person to come in on a project basis to kind of fix this for us? So I think that conversation actually can be had, right? And once you have your data in order, it's a lot easier to do the diagnosis coming afterwards. Right? Maybe moving on to the third thing I think you should be doing the first 30 or 60 days is get a good understanding of goals.
Yeah.
Meaning, you know, where does the company want to go strategically? You have had this before you joined. You maybe had some kind of rough numbers. Those numbers, by the way, always change a little bit after you signed and kind of land. So just make sure that you are extremely crystal clear of what the organization wants you to achieve.
Yeah.
How much money you get in order to achieve it and how those things work out. Just to kind of because you have a little bit in the first 3 months, you have a little bit of a free-for-all check.
Yeah.
To a degree, you can say, hey, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I can't stand for it. On the 91st day, I can promise to you, all of this is your problem.
Yeah.
Like up until then, you have a little bit of like, hey, I'm sorry, kind of, this is kind of not what I signed up for. And you know, this clearly doesn't work or whatever. On the 91st day, this flips completely around. It's like, well, you know, it's your thing now. Right. So, getting a clear understanding of those goals and expectations not only helps you to cover your ass a little bit, right? But also enables you, together with the data and the team, to understand like what really actually needs to happen, which levers needs to be pulled in order for this thing to even work out. And what the reason why I'm saying this, let's just say you need to double your new biz revenue, whatever. You have 20% coming out of marketing so far, right? Now spending your time trying to fix marketing to go to double, even triple in revenue. That will be pretty difficult. And it will not get you to where you need to go. So you need to understand in comparison kind of where the big levers I need to pull and actually to pull the whole thing off.
And I think it's also fair, right? Because you will never have all that insight before you join. And I think that's why the benefit of having onboarded yourself almost before you start enables you to take a look at these things and then provide that insight and say, hey, now I started. I didn't know that our sales cycle length was this long. So there's just no way we're going to be able to make it, right? So let's talk about what we can do instead. And I think that's just the pro move to make at the end of the day. And then you can always do like David Kellogg said, you can fire me now or fire me later. You know?
Yes. So exactly. And I think once you have, some of those pieces in place and you actually, they're strong enough to support some weight. I think at that point, you can do a little bit of a go-to-market diagnostic. I think we have an episode talking about how you would do this and then come to conclusions that might lead you to change something on the architectural level. Right. And in my case, it wasn't after the first 90 days. I think it was after the first half year or something like this. And maybe I just was looking for an excuse not to get fired. But I basically kind of said on the architectural level, like, hey, with setting 3 to 4K ACVs, 2 to 4K ACVs, every single other competitor out there has a self-serve motion. Why don't we have that? Right? And this was on the architectural level. I could say like, hey, it's going to be really difficult to grow this other thing because of unit dynamics and yada, yada. We discussed this a lot here on the show. And this is then where I then suggested architectural changes that then also were approved by the board and actually were like pretty important for the later on the acquisition. But basically, that's I think is a good way to go about it.
I think that's it. So we had 3 points. Start before you start.
Yes.
Get some points on the board. Actually, also a bit on how to work with the team and then running a go-to-market diagnostic. And I don't think you will find that in a common 30, 60, 90-day plan, but at least it's in our plan.
It's in our plan, and now it is in yours as well. If you really like this a bunch, hit like, subscribe, love, share it with your family. Thanks a bunch for listening. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.